Khandanam bhava bandhanam jaga bandhana bande tamai niranjanam nararupa dhara niranjanam nararupa dhara nirguna guna Jnana Dukha Jaya प्रभु मन वचनैकाधार ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदय कंदर ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदय कंदर तुमी तम भंजन हार प्रभु तुमी तम भंजन हार नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्यमनादित नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्यमनादित मन वचनैकाधार प्रभु मन वचनैकाधार ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदय कंदर ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदय कंदर तुमी तम भंजन हार प्रभु तुमी तम भंजन हार लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग गायছে छंद भक्त वृंद आरती तुम्हार गायছে छंद भक्त वृंद आरती तुम्हार जय जय आरती तुम्हार हर हर आरती तुम्हार शिव शिव आरती तुम्हार खंडन भाव बंधन जग बंधन बंदे तुम्हारे जय श्री गुरु महाराज जी की जय। ओम ह्रीं ऋतं त्वमचलं गुणजित् गुणेभ्यः नाक्तं दिवं सकरुणं तव पादपद्मं मोहं कषं बहुकृतं न भजे यतोऽहं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो भक्तिर्भगश्च भजनं भवभेदकारी गच्छन्तयलं सुविपुलं गमनाय तत्त्वं वक्त्रोद्धृतोऽपि हृदये न मे भाति तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो तेजस्तरन्ति तरसां त्वयि तृप्त तृष्णां रागे कृते ऋतपथे त्वयि राम कृष्णे मर्त्यामृतं तव पदं मरणोर्मि नाशं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो कृत्यं करोति कलुषं कुहकान्तकारी शान्तं शिवं सुविमलं तव नाम नाथ यस्मादहं त्वशरणो जगदेक गम्य तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो। ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमो श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ सर्वमङ्गल माङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थ साधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। सृष्टि स्थिति विनाशानां शक्ति भूते सनातने गुणाश्रये गुणमये नारायणी नमोस्तुते। शरणागतो दीनार्तो परित्राण परायणे सर्वस्यार्ति हरे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। जय 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 महामाई की जय। जय भगवान श्री रामकृष्ण देव की जय। जय स्वामी जी महाराज जी की जय।
Hello, check. Namah Shri Atirajaya Vivekananda Sure Satchit Sukhasvarupaya Swami Paharine. So onward with this lecture, Absolute and the Manifestation by Vivekananda. And last time, what we discussed was a certain logical inconsistency in trying to even ask the question, how does the Absolute become the manifest? Yeah. Now, yes, certainly, so there has to be a reason, but there has to be a commonsensical, more tangible reason too, and that's what Vivekananda comes to here. So, in asking what caused the Absolute, what an error we are making, and this is essentially the explanation he gave there last time, was essentially that, look, there's what are we really seeking? We are really seeking something that is free, in particular, something that is not caught within a causal framework. And so we are asking for a dimension of our existence fundamentally that is not caught in a structure bounded by causality. This was the discussion that happened last time. And now he says, coming from subtleties to the logic of our common plane, to common sense, we can see this from another side when we seek to know how the Absolute has become the relative. And here's the basic point that he's trying to make. Suppose one does know the answer. What? Well, somebody is asking basically, okay, there's this question, this seems to be a philosophical question. What if you did know the answer? Would that be a satisfactory thing? And that's what he's about to emphasize now. That a comprehensive answer to this question, first he argued that logically it cannot be found. Second, what he's trying to say here, and he's going to say now, is that suppose somebody gave you an answer and you were satisfied with it, then there has to be some mistake in one's understanding. Because the answer that is being sought is the underlying substance, the underlying structure, the underlying constitution of ourselves. And what we are giving answers in terms of is something more superficial, namely the intellectual structures through which we grasp reality. And so an answer that satisfies as a framework, as an intellectual framework, as a reasoned, thought out framework, cannot possibly be the final word. This is what he's coming to now. Supposing we knew the answer, would the Absolute remain the Absolute? It would have become relative. What is meant by knowledge in our common sense idea? It is only something that has become limited by our mind that we know, and when it is beyond our mind, it is not knowledge. Now, if the Absolute becomes limited by the mind, it is no more absolute. It has become finite. Everything limited by the mind becomes finite. Therefore, to know the Absolute is again a contradiction in terms. That is why this question has never been answered, because if it were answered, there would no more be an absolute. A God known is no more God. He has become finite like one of us. He cannot be known. He is always the unknowable one. This is essentially the idea that, look, if you try to capture the answer to some fundamental question like this, what does existence mean? What does truth mean? What is the absolute, etc., etc., and then posit some kind of a framework, some kind of an intellectual argument or a framework or an explanation, and essentially say this is all there is to it, then what one is making is a rather grave mistake. Because what one can put forward, what one can share with other people by means of words, by means of structures, by means of frameworks, is something that is objectifiable necessarily. You have some words, these words are sounds. They communicate something, some meaning to the hearer. But the words themselves, the means by which you are communicating, they are objects. You can write them down on paper as a sequence of words, or one can speak them out, and then this collection of sounds impacts the hearer. At any rate, it is something that is a third-person phenomenon, something that is an object of perception. Even logical frameworks can be written down and shared with somebody else. Yeah? That's how we communicate. This whole world goes on, this whole society goes on, because when I say I saw a blue cat there, you immediately understand, okay, so there is this color blue, there is this cat, and you combine those together, you get a mental image of a blue cat. What has been communicated, what is the object that has been communicated are these words, blue cat. If I spoke to somebody who does not know this language, they would have absolutely no idea. There would be no knowledge communicated. However, once there is a shared language, once there is a shared method of communication, then information gained by one individual can be shared with another individual. But what are we after here? All these frameworks are relative. That means they function in our day-to-day world. And this is what he's calling finite. Finite means that which can be encapsulated by our individual minds. Yeah? It's the individual mind which develops a framework and captures something there. Now, if we say that that which is encapsulated by an individual mind is unlimited, that will then be a contradiction in terms. Why? You're basically saying that this finite is the infinite. This something that is limited by my mind is actually something that is unlimited. That's a contradiction in terms. This contradiction is being pointed out here. So this aspiration of knowing, let's say from a devotional point of view, knowing or getting to know what God is, etc., etc., or from a more rational point of view, trying to inquire into what truth means, and suppose we were able to encapsulate it in words, then we would have actually done something that is fundamentally wrong. What's wrong about it? We are basically saying that that which cannot be encapsulated has now been encapsulated by my mind, by my set of words. This is the contradiction that he is pointing to here. Something that is unlimited being expressed purely in terms of a limited medium, namely speech, namely words, namely language. What is being conveyed here? That which is infinite, even in terms of our day-to-day experience, we should not, even in terms of our common sensical understanding of what we are aspiring for, it's basically saying that, look, if somebody tries to tell you that this is all there is to it, then know for certain that he or she is wrong. This is actually a reflection of something in the Kena Upanishad. If someone thinks he has known, then be fully convinced that he has not known it at all. Yasya amatam tasya matam, matam yasya na vedasaha. Matam means that I know. If somebody claims I know, this is something that is unconditioned, then know for certain that he does not know. Hidden in this is a certain rather liberating idea. See, basically in today's world, there's a lot of fighting, a lot of communalism between one religion claiming one truth versus another religion claiming another truth. And essentially each claiming that they have this special privileged position of knowing everything. So it's not an individual, but societies, cultures, who claim that they have this special privileged position of knowing everything about truth. How can that possibly be? And this points it out. Essentially, what one is saying is that there is this unconditioned truth, which is the sum and substance, which is the foundation of the existence of every individual. So I either say that each individual, independent of belief systems or lack of belief systems, has access to it, A, or say nobody has access to it. It cannot be something that is the special right of an individual or a group of individuals. This is really the heart, really lies at the heart of all conflicts which have a communal nature. It's basically a culture claiming superiority to another culture. The basis of it is fragmentation and, even deeper, a falsehood. The falsehood that is there, which gives rise to these notions that a society has greater claim to truth. That falsehood is basically this, that they are trying to pass off something that is limited, something that is conceptually constricted, as something that is final, that is infinite. There's a logical contradiction, and it gives rise to all these deeper conflicts which lead to various kinds of violence in society. And the Upanishads themselves declare, in a certain, there is in the Brihadaranyaka, there's this one beautiful statement, Tatra Veda Aveda Bhavati. There, what we refer to as the Vedas, sources of knowledge, become non-knowledge. Those become limited. Those become the antithesis of knowledge. Why? Because one is trying to penetrate to the heart of knowledge itself. Not frameworks given by books, not frameworks given by words even of the wisest, but knowledge itself obtained through a deep and intense personal inquiry. Why? Because this core of knowledge, this core element which we call knowledge, is there in each one of us. Its essence is the same as that as the essence of existence. When I say I exist, I say so without fully understanding the import of that word. Oh, people usually respond by saying, oh, this is some common sense thing. We exist. Of course, we know we exist. Of course, we know we exist are just a bunch of words. It's usually born of people who have not really thought deeply about these questions. This entire philosophical field of ontology, it's called the philosophy of being, yes, dwells on this. What do you mean by saying that something exists or something does not exist? Once it's essentially, it's the fact is that our mental machinery is rather frail. What it's trying to do here, when we ask questions which are as fundamental as what does it mean for me to exist? What does it mean for, say, this table to exist? Well, at a certain superficial level, there is something that we can use to converse with other people. There is some shared blurred boundaries where we do not inquire. But when one is asking this fundamental question, what does it really mean? One is trying to shine a light on precisely those blurred boundaries. And that gives rise to deep discoveries. One of the pillars of 20th century physics, namely quantum mechanics, its philosophical ramifications are still not entirely clarified, one would say, because philosophical attitudes are things that one cannot quite, that has a certain element of subjectivity to it. So there are various schools of philosophy about it, but that's not important. The point is that a discovery as fundamental as quantum mechanics, it challenges the way we look at reality. Existence and non-existence as something particular, as some things which are contradictory logically, could coexist. That kind of thing does appear in a certain garb, in a certain faint garb maybe, but it does appear. And these discoveries challenge the way we think, challenge these commonsensical answers that we usually give ourselves, and which we usually, from this particular point of view, from this particular analytic point of view, answers that we give to largely fool ourselves into believing that we actually understand. This is reflected in this particular passage. Yasya matam tasya matam, matam yasya na veda saha. Yeah, this is Kena Upanishad. One who claims he knows does not. Yeah? That's what. Why? Because one is trying to claim knowledge of something which is intrinsically not caught, not something that can be caught within a limited framework of words or language or intellectual structures. So this is one aspect of it. It basically says that what you can do is really continue with this process of inquiry. This question, what does it mean to know? What is the truth? What does it mean to exist? Etc., etc. Fundamental questions. When you ask fundamental questions like this, what you are entitled to do is try to find an answer for yourself. Not propose it as a dogma, not propose it as a doctrine, not propose it as an answer that will satisfy anybody apart from yourself. But it is a certain process, and the fruits of that process can be shared for those who would like to pick up some aspects of that process to utilize for their own subjective process of inquiry. That's all that we can do, no more. But if somebody says that no, this is the only process, then essentially what that person is claiming is that his or her version of stupidity is to be shared by everybody. Yeah, essentially, such a person says that, look, this is the only way. Why? If you probe it deep enough, it basically means that because that person cannot think deeper, which means that my level of superficiality has to be shared by everybody else. There is no pursuit of knowledge here. All of it boils down to a pursuit of power, power over other people. That's what is there. It's essentially politics that is involved, not a pursuit of knowledge. And so, when people try to pass off their own particular religious dogma, some particular teleological conviction, as something that is definitive, they are indulging in this piece of dishonesty. Instead of trying to probe deeper into oneself and ask these questions, pursue these questions further by asking, do I really know the meaning of what I mean when I say I exist? Do I really understand what I say, what I mean when I say I know? Instead of that, some partial answer that I have obtained for myself is something that is imposed on somebody else. This is a certain very pragmatic, practical implication of this unknowability. Yeah? In Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Bhagavan kotha iti kora jay na. This is what he says in Bengali. Iti means end. You cannot say it is thus far and no further. Yeah? Why? Because human mind keeps developing. And as human minds develop, this saying that some kind of a teleological end has been obtained, some end has been obtained, and that's encapsulated with this framework, no more. That is a contradiction in terms. This is what he is trying to bring out, both in terms of logical reasoning, where he says that, look, absolute being something infinite cannot be caught in a finite framework, along with the more emotive response. Look, suppose you did get an answer. How would you say that answer is the be all and end all? After all, something encapsulated by an answer is finite. So if your aspiration really was for the infinite, then these words are not adequate. Yeah? This is expressed in various different ways in various different um, traditions. So, for example, in one of the Upanishads that he'll come to, like, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. Yeah? Yato vacho nivartante. From where speech returns along with the mind. Essentially, it says that, look, the speech and mind are inadequate tools for a complete expression of what our aspiration is towards. The final goal of an aspiration is essentially this annihilation of aspiration. When will we be satisfied? Almost tautologically, when we are left with nothing else to aspire for, which means this faculty of aspiration, say for truth, for bliss, for existence unhampered by anything else. This aspiration can only be satisfied by discovering a dimension within ourselves that is not caught within frameworks. But what we can express in words, what we can think, what we can write down, what we can communicate, necessarily, logically, has to be limited. It cannot be, by almost tautologically, by definition, something that is caught within a framework of speech, within a framework of shared information. What he's done so far, Vivekananda, is essentially challenge our usual way of thinking, challenge religious dogmas, challenge this assumption that I know best. And this is all there is to it. This is ignorance no more. But this brings in the possible danger that what we are aspiring for can never be satisfied. There's a fine needle to be threaded. On the one hand, there is dogmatism born out of various schools of religion. On the other hand, there is this other tendency to throw all of it away. That position is also not what he is aspiring, what he is aiming towards, and this is explained next. But what Advaita says is that God is more than knowable. This is a great fact to learn. You must not go home with the idea that God is unknowable in the sense in which agnostics put it. For instance, here is a chair. It is known to us. But what is beyond ether, or whether people exist there or not, is possibly unknowable. Yeah. This is a certain point. I mean, essentially, these very speculative things. Is there something beyond this space-time of this universe? Pure speculation. This is something that is unknowable because we are asking for an answer within the framework of our mind, and when one says it is unknowable, essentially it's basically saying that, look, this framework can capture that, but it is not capturable within that framework. It can in principle capture it, but it cannot capture it, is provable. But that's not the case with this aspiration for something fundamental, something absolute. But God is neither known nor unknowable in this sense. He is something still higher than known. That is what is meant by God being unknown and unknowable. The expression is not used in the sense in which it may be said that some questions are unknown and unknowable. God is more than known. This chair is known, but God is intensely more than that. Because in and through Him, we have to know this chair itself. He is the witness, the eternal witness of all knowledge. Whatever we know, we have to know in and through Him. He is the essence of our own self. He is the essence of this ego, this I, and we cannot know anything excepting in and through that I. Therefore, you have to know everything in and through the Brahman. To know the chair, you have to know it in and through God. Thus, God is infinitely nearer to us than the chair, but yet He is infinitely higher. Neither known nor unknown, but something infinitely higher than either. He is yourself. Who would live a second? Who would breathe a second in this universe if that blessed one were not filling it? This is a free paraphrasing of something from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Ko hye vanyat kaf pranyat yad eshe akashe ananda nasyat. What he's trying to say here is that it's going back to this fundamental theme that all of Vedanta dwells with, namely this notion of consciousness. What is the universal dimension? Again, it brings back this question, what does it mean when I say I exist? What does it mean when I say I know such and such a thing? In other words, it's trying to get at this basic principle of knowledge, basic principle of existence, as an experiential fact, as a first person thing, not as something that is third person, not as something that can be objectified and shared. but as something that is part and parcel of ourselves. When I see this camera in front of me, and I say that I see and know this camera, then I am assuming, even before making that statement, that there is this principle in me that defines my psyche called knowledge. It is in and through that principle of knowledge that one knows a camera. When I say that this camera in front of me exists, this mic in front of me exists, this book in front of me exists, it subsumes that I know for certain something called existence. So the substratum of all human experience is knowledge, is existence, and there is no difference between the two. Something's existence cannot be separated from its knowledge. And what one is asking here, and what one is pointing out here, is that is the same as the principle of joy or bliss, without which one would not be able to exist even for a second. Yeah, that's this last thing. Essentially, enquiry into any fundamental aspect of one's being, one's own existence, the fact that one knows something, there is something that gives one joy, and there is pain that one wants to avoid. All of this is basically saying that, look, there is this fundamental principle of joy, fundamental principle of knowledge, fundamental principle of existence. That is the basis of all our activities, mental, physical, emotional, and otherwise. Inquire into that. Hold on to one aspect of your being. This is a process. I mean, in other schools, it's given a different name. So, for example, in the yoga school, this is called dharana. So, for example, even the processes of enquiry. So, Raman Maharshi, a great Jnani of the last century, would advocate this. Who am I? In more religious, more theistic traditions, there is prayer, or there is this things about mantras, etc., etc. These are all methods of getting the mind focused at a point. It's a mechanism, psychological. I mean, the general psychological framework for this, all that is called dharana. It's essentially catching hold of one thing and then pursuing it deeper and deeper. Here, that process is directed towards something fundamental, something that underlies all our existence, all our knowledge, all our bliss and joy. Yeah? We'll return to this next time. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.